and welcome to That's Cool Speaks. Today is October 31st, and this is the bonus episode for October because I don't like to cut it fine at all. Oh, yes, I do. So this is a bonus episode. It's not a traditional, shenanigans and knitting. So if you're looking for a regular podcast, just go back to the YouTube channel and pick another one with a number. But in this one, I will be talking about some board games. So I do these bonus episodes once a month with the help of not Gus, because he's not helpful. With the help of folks who donate to the podcast via Patreon or PayPal or Ko-Fi. So thank you very much to all those folks. Yay! They make these things possible, and I greatly appreciate them. So this is not necessarily a board game review episode. It's more of just like an introduction. So none of the games I'm mentioning are particularly new. In fact, most of them are over a year old. So, it's not like go out and buy this. It's just like, these are the games that we've been playing recently that we have enjoyed. So mostly our 2019 kind of most played is what I'm showing you today. Now, we have not been playing as many board games as we traditionally do. And we have really been, maybe we've not been skewing towards lighter games. I think we've always kind of played lighter games. I like a crunchier game, but Tova is almost 13. And so I guess, spending one-on-one time with her mother takes enough mental headspace that she can also cannot be expected to strategize in deep ways. So these definitely skew towards what I would think of as the lighter end of the spectrum. What else should I tell you? These are all games that we play pretty much only with two people. Not pretty much. We exclusively play these games with two people, so that is what I am speaking from. You'll definitely have a different player experience, a different player counts. What else? So yeah, with each game, I'm just going to kind of show you what the game looks like. I'll talk a little bit about what's going on, what we like about it, what we might not like about it. But again, this is mostly just like an introduction to these games for folks who may not be into board games, particularly there's a train, I'm sorry, who may not particularly be into board games and therefore are not searching around on Board Game Geek or watching. I totally watch people play board games on YouTube. So if you're, not that kind of person, but you do realize that winter's coming and you'd like to have something that you can play with family that's not going to be weather dependent. So this might be for you. And all of these games have lots of other reviews. They're all pretty popular games. None of them are niche games. So if you're like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting, before you run out and buy it, I would suggest that you go into YouTube, search the name, and then the word game. So Wingspan game. And you can get some other folks' perspectives. Lots of these games have either rule explanations. So if you're if you find it difficult or challenging, or just maybe not even challenging, but maybe you just don't want to read through rule books or rule pamphlets, and you would just like to have somebody explain to you how to play the game, or if you are a person who knows how to play games or does enjoy reading rule books, but you kind of want hints on how to teach other people how to play a game, that's always a good resource. But these all have that out there. So they'll all have a rules explanation somewhere. They'll all have other reviews somewhere. And many of them actually have playthroughs in other locations. For example, I think Tiny Towns and Wingspan both have a game night playthrough. So you can get some rules explanation at the beginning of those episodes if you don't really want to watch the whole thing. But anyway, it might just give you a better handle on the game than this, which will just be a very introductory level. This is this game, I like it. So here we go. Oh, I guess I should talk about which games we're going to talk about. So in a minute, I'm going to talk about the following games. And nope. Gus just knocked down the alternative camera setup for the overhead shots. He's very surprised about what he's done. I put it in his cat perching window, so he was not pleased with the situation. Just showed me that. Anyway, in no particular order. I'll be talking about Tiny Towns. I'll be talking about, Barron Park. I'll be talking about Indian Summer, but mostly I'll be talking about the iOS version of this game. And I'll be talking about this is the newest of the games. This, unfortunately, is currently hard to get, but it won't be for long. It just recently won a pretty big award, so it'll be in reprint any minute now. So this is Tiny Towns by Peter McPherson. It's 1 to 6 players, 45 to 60 minutes, ages 14 and up, and the MSRP is $39.99. Now, typically people say that at the higher counts this gets a little bit crazy, and I completely can see why. We'll talk about that when we talk a little bit more about the game. And then age-wise, it says 14 and up. The rules are super easy. You actually need very minimal language skills or what have you. However, it's very puzzly, and so I think 10 and up is what Board Game Geek suggests is pretty good if you have a kid who has played some other board games, have some, spatial reasoning and some logic strategy experience. Again, anybody can play it. It just is a challenge to set your town up in a way that works. So let's look at the game itself. Okay, so nice rule book. I found it to be clear. It has great big photos. It has good detail on what all of the special cards mean. Nicely done. You have scorecards that are big and chunky and clear. Your player boards are a nice thick cardboard. Here are some resource cards, which is a way to play instead of having folks draw resources, but I'll talk about that in a second. And then you have big chunky wooden pieces for your buildings that you're building. And then your resource cubes are a bit plainer, but they're still nice, chunky, meaty, easy to pick up. It would be a colorblind issue because there is nothing to differentiate them except the color. The buildings do have their own shapes. And then you have your town cards. So essentially what you're doing in this game is you're building a tiny town. And you're doing that, let's see, in the town square or in the middle of the playing space, there are all these cards laid out. And so, for example, this is the cottage. This is in every game. If you can place squares that look like this anywhere on your game board, then you get to build a cottage. So you get to put down one of these cool blue pieces in any one of the 3 spaces that this building you built. So there's tons of different cards. The cottage is going to be in every game, but there are, for example, 4 different of the kind of barn types, and they all have different configurations, which use different resources. You'll see that's the only one that includes glass is the greenhouse. How cutely thematic is that? But they'll all have special properties. So this one feeds all the buildings within 8 squares surrounding the barn. Okay? So this one feeds 4 buildings anywhere in your town. So that doesn't matter where you put your buildings, your houses. This one is a contiguous group. This one is in the same row and column. So there's lots of different replayability in terms of your different building styles. The cottage is the only one, and you'll see the symbol. That's how you know that they're referring to the cottage. Is the only one that's going to remain constant. Then each person will also draw one of these purple cards, and this will be their secret objective, essentially. So this one is a grand mausoleum. Your unfed houses are worth 3 each. So that's pretty exciting. And that's victory points. So those are your secret objectives, and you'll see they all have different kind of complexity of build and what have you. So that kind of keeps it fresh as well. Tova really likes this game. She really enjoys the puzzly factor of it. What you do is, like in a 2-player game, I'll decide that I'm going to build this Opalese watch or whatever. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to start with brown. I'm going to call brown. So I get to put down a brown cube, and then my opponent also puts down the same color cube, whether they need that resource or not. And there's kind of the rub of the game. Especially when you get to higher player counts, like 5, 6 players, you're only getting to choose one of the resource out of 6 rounds. And if you're not really careful, you can end up with like a lot of garbage on your board that you can't get rid of. So when you're playing with younger players or more inexperienced players, you can adopt house rules that, like, say, let you put 2 of the resources off to the side, or you know, you let younger players maybe readjust if they're little fellows. But it gets very sticky very quickly, and it causes a lot of, you did not just call window glass. That happens. So I've only played it at 2 players. It's not that much of an issue at 2 players. I mean, it can really mess you up, but you can kind of guard against it. However, you can imagine at 5 or 6 players, that's really going to be sticky. So they've included these resource cards. So another way to play it is to, and it's in the rule book, is to play so that you draw 2 resource cards. So 2 resources will be randomized. And then you get to pick, like the individual gets to pick their 3rd resource. So that 3rd resource is essentially whatever individual wants. It's not like everybody's putting down window glass. You can put down window glass and your friend can put down brick, what have you. So it kind of helps with that. It also helps you to kind of, you can see there's not that many cards. You can kind of anticipate like, whoa, we haven't had any window glass. It's probably going to be window glass coming up. So it just depends on how you like to play. But yeah, you can see the scores are pretty close. There was one game where Tova lost by quite a bit, but usually they tend to be fairly tight. I mean, I could definitely see how they wouldn't. Like they could just be like a runaway. Or again, like somebody's planned something and then it goes horribly wrong. So some people will say like, well, if you're all using communal resources in this traditional standard play, do people not just copy each other and then, but no, we've never experienced that. Usually people have their own kind of objectives that they're going for. Like they really dig cottages and they really dig millstones, or, you know, it's usually not an issue that people are putting down the same. Again, you also each have an individual purple card that you're working for, which will kind of push you into one direction or the other in terms of what you want to build. Now, I will say this, we have never, I don't think either of us, we've probably played a total of 8 times, I would say, and I don't think either of us have ever built one of the factories. But maybe that's just poor gamemanship on our part. I don't know. But otherwise, it's enjoyable. And at 2 players, it goes super fast. I mean, maybe it's 30 minutes. And so usually what happens is we finish 1 round of it and then we play at least 1 or 2 more because it kind of gives you that like, oh, I should have tried this or I should have tried that. And again, it's a pretty short game, so you never feel like, oh, I've really ruined, and now I'm going to sit through 3 hours of a game that I have no chance of doing well at. So this one is more of a Tova game than a mom game, but at the same time, when she wants to play it, I'm not like, no. So that's Tiny Towns by Peter McPherson. Again, lots of reviews out there on the interwebs that you can find that go into more detail. This is Barron Park by Phil Walker Harding. It is a 2 to 4 player game that usually runs about 30 to 45 minutes, and it's ages 8 and up. Excuse me. This one is a sort of Tetris-y kind of game that is somewhat, really, Gus? That's not a firm surface for you to sit on, buddy. Which is very similar in terms of like the tile laying portion of it to a game I've talked about a little bit in the past called Patchwork. But while Patchwork is only available for 2 players, this one is available for 2 to 4. So I personally prefer Patchwork more. I feel like it's a tighter game. I like the theme better. I feel like it's a little bit more challenging, but certainly if you're playing with more than 2 people, this is a good option. And also Tova really likes this one. She likes the theme more. And it's less thinky, especially with 2 people, it becomes a very casual game. So it's up to you and what you like. Let's look inside the box. Gus is going to help us, I think. So instructions are good, totally doable. It is another one that is a very easy teach. The concept is pretty clear. People usually get it right away. There are video how-tos if you prefer that kind of thing. There is a common board that you place in the middle that people will be pulling pieces from. And as you can see, they're your very familiar Tetris-y sort of shapes. Your individual player board will look like this. There are starting player boards that have fun countries attached to them. It doesn't mean anything, but it does allow some variability for what your board looks like when you start. Eventually in your game, you're going to be putting together 4 of these tiles to create a larger park, but you'll start with just one. So the setup of the game looks something like this when you're getting ready to play. Every player count has slightly different number of these pieces that will be available to folks. These pieces, these unique pieces, are always available to everyone. These are kind of like your filler pieces. You can see they're smaller configurations. They don't have a points value on them, and all of the other ones do. Now, these are, again, just singles. So whoever gets to the number 8 first and thinks they can use that shape is going to get it. And the same is same as essentially here too, but they're in descending order. So the first person who gets this, well, if I did things correctly, the first person who gets this piece is going to get a 6-point piece. The next person who gets to it's going to get 4. The next person 2. And again, this is for a two-player game. There are other pieces available when you're playing with higher player counts. But essentially, the game is just that. On your turn, you're going to be picking a tile and putting it on your board. And essentially, how you know which tile to pick is what you're covering up. So, for example, if my starting piece was this one, I might decide, I would really like to get one of these higher point dudes like that. So I would take a piece from here and I would play it on my next turn. Consequently, I could decide, I really want to build a new section to my park and get that piece. So I'm going to put my first piece there. I'll get to pick one of these and I'll get to put a new piece of my park adjacent to this one, which is very exciting, especially as you're getting into these pieces that are unique, that take up lots more room. It's helpful to have more of your park open to build with, okay? So that's how it works. If for some reason you cover something up that doesn't have a cool little thing underneath of it, then you're going to get to take a free piece if you don't have anything. And so they're bathrooms, food trucks, playgrounds, and rivers. And there are different ways in the game that these things can count for points. When you're first starting off, you may not want to use these, but there are kind of like special objectives that you can add to increase the value, to increase the replayability and to encourage other strategies. Sorry. Some of them are things like the first person who gets 3 polar bears in their park. It might be whoever can get the longest river, or who gets 3 of these food trucks in a row, or so that it creates some variability and also gives people a different path to success. Because when you're playing, for example, if you're playing a 2-player game like we usually do, and you're not playing with those, it becomes very rote. Like, I'm just going to try to get all the highest things I can first. When I complete my park, leaving this area open, I get to place a bear statue there. And the first person, when you complete it, you get to pull your bear statue, and the bear statues are in descending order. So the first person is going to get the most points. And so it becomes, on a 2-player game when you don't have special objectives, it becomes just very back and forth. We usually just kind of occasionally blips up, but usually the first person who's going to get done is going to get this one, and then it's just going to alternate down the line. So that gives you different paths, and it's a little bit helpful. Otherwise, for me, for 2 players, this can get a little snoozy. Now, obviously, at higher player counts, you have much more competition for these spaces because for these pieces, since there's only one of them. So that creates a little bit more tension as well. But yeah, this is another one that Tova really enjoys because she kind of enjoys just a casual game that she's not too committed to. At 2 players, it's pretty fast. Even at the 4-player mark, you're looking at 30 to 45 minutes. It just depends on how fast your players are in terms of their decision-making timeframes. But so it's fun. And it's another one where usually we get done with one round and we want to play another one just to try out some different configurations or what have you. But that's Barron Park. Ta-da! This is Indian Summer by Uwe Rosenberg. He also designed Patchwork. He has actually Patchwork and then a trilogy of these kind of Tetris-y tiling games. He has another game that has this component to it. And he's designed a ton of other games. But anyway, so I mentioned Patchwork specifically because I have talked about it before. And I will admit, this is not a game that is favored by a lot of people. but it's really pretty. So let's talk a little bit about it. It is a 1 to 4 person player count. Most people, Board Game Geek suggests 3, so they say it's best at 3 players. 15 to 60 minutes run playtime. I can't imagine where that 15 minutes is coming from. Yeah, that's crazy. It's definitely a little bit longer game. Now it's never been more than 60 minutes, but 15 minutes you would have to be pretty speedy. And it's ages 10 and up. And the MSRP on this one is high. It's $59.95. So, it's been around a long enough time that there are definitely used copies out there. This tends to be a game that people want to try out because of the designer and then don't unnecessarily love, so they're more willing to part with it. But there you have it. You can also get it for less, for example, on Cool Stuff. If you don't have a local game store, then that's a great option to avoid Amazon. But certainly if you have a local game store, by the time you pay for shipping, maybe you're saving $10. So it'd be really great if you could support them with those few extra dollars. So let's just look at it inside. It is gorgeous. And I will completely confess that that's why it's still in a physical copy on our shelves. So these are the player boards. But look at the pieces. Look at the pieces. It's like this beautiful autumnal forest of gorgeousness. Right. There are the little player aids that tell you like what the special little pieces, the components do are so cute. There are squirrels. So many squirrels. Your little specialty fruits that you gather. Blueberries, acorns, mushrooms. Oh, here we go. Mushrooms and feathers that you gather through the game. And then another thing that you can do is gather these special animals through different configurations. Oh my God, look, there's a pattern. So this is always like, I really just enjoy this game. I will confess, Tova doesn't dig it. And so sadly, even though this game is gorgeous, it often just hangs out on the shelf. So I'll show you the iOS version, which is the version I end up playing most. So here is the iOS version of Indian Summer. Hopefully my voice is not going to compete too much with the sound effects. I did record once with the music on and it was very difficult to hear me. So hopefully this one will go better. If it doesn't, I will just put it out there as it is. You can play against online folks. You can play against folks you know or just strangers in a ranked game. I don't. And when I'm playing this game, I tend to just like to play it maybe before bed or just when I need to kind of relax, but still be a little bit engaged in what's going on. Like most AI, there is the problem that the easy setting is ridiculously easy. The medium setting is more like medium easy. And then the hard setting is impossible. Not entirely impossible, but it is significantly more challenging. But so this is what the gameplay looks like. And what you're going to do is essentially you have your pieces at the bottom. You're going to be putting them on the board. And you're trying to cover up your squares, your playing area, but you'd like to place the holes of your pieces on important little things. So for example, let's say I place this here. The goodies that you collect go in descending order from top to bottom. So the feathers are the most important and the blueberries are the least important. The feathers allow you a second turn. The mushrooms allow you to steal 2 pieces from your opponent. The acorns lets you put in an extra piece, just a single piece, the squirrel piece. And then the blueberries, when you play those, they'll refill your little player area before it's actually empty. So if you have 2 pieces left and they're both garbage, you can use a blueberry to add your 3 more pieces in. So you just place your tile. That's definitely where I want it to go. And you'll see down here that there's a little arrow. So the gameplay is very similar in look to the board game version. It just goes a little bit faster, because you're playing against AIs. And then B, because you don't have to kind of mess with placing tiles and moving them around and all that good stuff. So I'll just show you a few more turns. And so you saw in that last turn how my opponents took a piece from me just because they played their mushrooms. There's some people complain about the board game version that they do not like that kind of take that component. It doesn't bother me. Usually I'm not a fan of take that, but especially when you're just playing an AI, it feels like not personal at all. And there are things you can do. The players can only take your first available piece. So when that's a good piece, like the one that I have here, they're going to be more likely to take it than when it's just a green piece, which is worth slightly less. So if I wanted to say, I'd like to have some more pieces, I can just dump a blueberry in my backpack and it will give me all of these lovely pieces. If you'd like to, in your turn, you can also place a squirrel. You can use an acorn to place a squirrel, which is a single space. But as you can see, it just covers up any resources. You don't get access to them. But what I want, and you would never do that at this point in the game, but I just wanted to show you a little bit of something. So you see how that last squirrel completed my unit, my bottom left unit? So once the unit is complete, that's when you score the fruits that are in there. It's also, if you notice on the bottom, there's this little lizard fellow. And this is the second component to the game. There are these pieces that cover up essentially your holes or your other fruits, and they let you score them again. So in this case, I'm going to use my fox, and he'll let me score 2 acorns and a mushroom again. Okay? And that's just part of your turn. It's not an extra turn or anything. And then he pops up there, which is so cute. Very exciting when I get the badger to pop up. It makes me very happy. But so that's another thing that you're doing in the game. And so just so I'm going to hit play just so it stops clicking. So throughout the game, that's all you're doing. You're just placing tiles, you're taking tiles, you're using these special actions. And it's essentially kind of a race to complete your boards. Because once somebody completes their boards, if you have empty spaces, they count against you. Now, as you can see, you can use those nuts to cover up your empty spaces. So that's a way to do it. But you won't be able to get any of the resources on those spaces. So it is good. You have some players that want to really push the timeline, and other players who want to meticulously cover everything up and get as many little animal pieces as they can. So it's good that some players can push the others to move faster. And it keeps you have to pay attention to what the other players are doing, A, so that you may potentially steal a piece that they really want, or B, just more basically to see where they're at in terms of how quickly they're going to finish and how quickly you need to move. So it's a really lovely little game. The board game version is just as pretty. It's just that since I play this version more often, I thought I should show it to you, and it is significantly less expensive. So isn't that the cutest? However, if you don't just have $60 like that fell from the sky into your lap, and maybe play games by yourself more often, or maybe it was just a couple other people and maybe they wouldn't be so enchanted by this one, the iOS is a pretty good alternative. It also means it's a little bit less fiddly in terms of like moving pieces around and feeding into the it also means that the kind of take that component of the game where the mushrooms allow you to take a piece from another player, it feels less like take that. It just feels like something that's going to happen inevitably. And it doesn't feel quite so personal. So that's the other reason I like the iOS. And let's face it, it was gorgeous, right? Right. Okay. And so the last game I'll talk about is Wingspan. Now, I will warn you before we get into this one, this was not the only one I'm talking about that's not really readily available right now. However, it did recently win a pretty prestigious award, so it'll be in print again. It's just going to take a minute. I did get this one through a pre-order last spring, or excuse me, during the spring of 2019 from Stonemaier, and it was super speedy. It wasn't like a traditional Kickstarter. It was a pre-order. So I think, I don't know, I'm feeling like it was only a few months before it came in. So unlike waiting a year or something for a Kickstarter, they actually had it ready pretty much. I just don't think they had it in their hands yet, but it had already been developed and printed and everything. So that's that. This one is designed by Elizabeth Hargrave, and all the art is by Lady Folks, which is pretty exciting to me. This is a 1 to 5 player game, 40 to 70 minute game time, and suggested ages of 10 and up. Board Game Geek suggests 3 players as the optimal count. And I would agree with that. With 2 players, there are a few things that are a little bit less than ideal, but whatever. We still really like this game. Complete disclosure, I'll buy anything with a bird on it. Not literally, but pretty close. So I'm definitely, like, my opinion is definitely swayed by theming. So, and I'll talk about more about that when I show you the game itself. Now, I'm not usually an unboxing kind of person, but this one does have really lovely components. And so I will show you what it looks like just in the box. You get an idea. The instruction booklet is in this beautiful linen finished paper. It's super over the top fancy nice, but it's super over the top fancy nice. So it has an appendix, which gives you a little bit more information about bonus cards and powers if you need more clarity. I think they're pretty clear, but, you know, especially if you're newer to gaming, it might be a little bit more complicated. And then this is super cool. This game has an automa, so you can play single player, and I have played single player in this game several times, and it is brilliant. I really love it. Most multiplayer board games that you can play single player, you know, lots of times they feel either fiddly or like fake, or it's like, oh, play against yourself to get your best points of, you know, your historical playing. And it just feels like blah. This one is really good, and it's very clever and fun to do. So if you do like to play occasionally a game by yourself, I highly recommend you try it out because it's pretty cool. So it's a pretty basic little scorecard, and then I'll show you the rest. Actually, I'll just show you the rest laid out. While I'm laying it out, I will stop to show you this. The game actually comes with these very cool little containers that contain the different foods. Now, for some reason, the game contains 5 foods, and I only got 4 clever little containers, but you can certainly use the lid as another thing to hold. But it's really nice because you don't have to look for, well, it's just nice. It keeps the playing area tidy, and it keeps everything sorted so that you're not constantly going back and forth. The actual bottoms are curved, so it's very easy to scoop stuff out. And it's just all around quite pleasant. Another part of the components that are very clever is that this box stores your cards, but cleverly the little lid becomes the display. It has indentations so that it's very easy to lay your display cards out, and so totally not necessary, but fun and cute and cool. Okay, so then let's talk about the game itself. Of the games I've showed you today, this is definitely the most complicated rule set. Now, that's not to say that it is terribly complicated. I feel like it's actually pretty intuitive. The way that the board is designed is pretty intuitive. But of the ones I've shown you, I think this one is the most complicated. That said, if you don't dig reading rule books, there are lots of how to play videos for this game. And in fact, I think there are probably how to play video games for all of them. Or even if there's not necessarily a how to play, there's probably people playing the game in which you can learn how to play if that's your jam. Okay, so in this game, basically your objective is to add birds to your bird sanctuary, to attract birds to your bird sanctuary. You have 3 different environments. You have a forest environment, a grassland environment, and a water environment. And each of these 3 things lets you do different powers per se. The forest environment is all about getting more food. So these super awesome food dice and the cool corresponding food tokens, that all happens here. The grasslands are all about getting more eggs. And then the water birds are all about getting more cards. So each bird on its card will have where it belongs. Now this one is very versatile. He can live in any environment, but your pygmy nuthatch really wants to live in the forest. Underneath that is the cost of food that it takes to buy this card, essentially. So he requires that you have like 2 wormy grub dudes. He requires a grub and a wheat. Okay. This is their point value at the end of the game. This is the kind of nest they have. So there are ground nests, there are bowl nests. You can see this one is different. It's a bowl nest. And they are appropriate to the bird itself. And then there's also the number of eggs that nest can hold. Okay. Underneath of that, they have their power in the game, essentially what they're going to do when they're activated. So you receive you receive a reward from where they're placed, food, eggs, or cards, but then the birds themselves give you a reward. And so in this case, this is a vulture, a black vulture. Oh, I'm sorry, they also include the bird's wingspan. Okay, so once between the turns, when another player's carrion bird succeeds, womp, bird of prey succeeds, you gain a food from the bird feeder, right? So there are some birds that, this one you get to tuck cards, which means you add cards and you get more points for those. Some of them allow you to stockpile food and get more points for that. And then of course, some of them are just gonna give you points towards your individual goal. Did we talk about that? I don't know that we did. So you'll also have this, for example, you're gonna be the viticulturist in this round, and you want birds that eat berries. So if you get 2 to 3 birds that eats berries, you get 3 bonus points. And if you get more than 4, you get 7 bonus points. Well, victory points. I guess they're not bonus points. And then on the very bottom of the card, you get like a fun fact about the bird. So this is a logger-headed shrike. Shriek? That's not a bird I know. Shrikes impale their prey on thorns or barbed wire and may save them for later. Right. So for me, that part alone is so enjoyable, just to see the birds, see their powers and things like that. But I also enjoy the gameplay as well. And I've heard lots of other people who say that they're not into birds at all still enjoy the game. So it's not just for bird folks, but it's pretty exciting. Okay, and so besides your personal objective, you have something in the game that's going to look like this. You will have group objectives. So the most competitive way to play it is this way, where you have people taking first, second, and third place. Okay, so in this case, it'll be whoever has the most eggs in this kind of nest, in a tree nest. This round will be the most bird that has this kind of nest with eggs. So you can have just 1 egg on there, or you can have 7, it'll still count the same. This will be sets of 3 eggs that are either in any of the environments. So these are scored at the end of each round. Very cleverly, your markers in the game, your player pieces or what have you, are used to indicate where you score per round. So if I get first place there, that's awesome. I get 4 points. But you'll notice that means the next round, I have 1 fewer action cubes. So the game gets progressively tighter and tighter. And so while you may start off with having 8 actions, by the time you're all said and done, you're only going to have 5 actions. So it's really great. It really hems the game in. It makes it tight. It means that you can't do everything that you want to do. You may have a completely different idea at the beginning of the game than what you end up with at the end. But I enjoy that. I enjoy being left wanting more versus being like, okay, that was way too long. Do you know what I mean? And so this kind of system really keeps that going. Now, if you're playing with less competitive people, or you're playing with, well, whatever, if you just don't want to be as tight of a game, because as you can see, the first place in this category gets 4 points, but if you're in third place, you get nothing. And even second place, you only get 1. You can play, the game has another side to the card. So you can play for just the number, for example, and this would be just however many eggs you have in nests, up to 5 points. So if you only have 1, you get 1 point. But if you have 5, you get 5. You have 8, you get 5. Okay? And there are several of these little things, goals, and they randomize, so they're double-sided, and each game is going to be a random set of goals for the group for the 4 rounds. So I really enjoy it. It gives it a lot of variability and adds another little thing to be kind of aiming towards in the game. So the gameplay is relatively basic. I mean, on your turn, you get to do one of 4 things. You can add another bird, you can gain food, you can lay eggs, or you can draw bird cards. And you just indicate that by placing your cube wherever you would like. So in this case, if I put my cube here, I can get 2 food, excuse me, from the communal food from that fun little dice tower. And if I want to, I can also trade up to 1 bird card for a food. So you can see that as you add cards to your aviary, your benefits get greater and greater for the turn. So by the time I'm out here, I get 4 eggs. But when I started, I only got 2. So you'll also see, so then you draw more cards, what have you. If you want to play a bird, you'll also see that you have to pay a larger and larger number of eggs. And so that's in addition to their food cost. But so those are your actions that you're taking. Basically, that's all you're doing. So when I do this, I get to take my food, and then what I do is I activate my cards in this row. So sometimes a bird will not have an activation point. This bird just gets you something when you're played. You get to take all of the fish that are in the bird feeder if you play the bald eagle, because bald eagles steal fish. Ben Franklin thought this was a bad choice for the U.S. national bird. Right. Anyway. So some cards don't have anything, but most of them do. They'll have a bar that says when activated. For example, you get to gain a wheat or a berry from the bird feeder if there is one. Then you also get to discard an egg from any of your other birds to gain 2 food from the supply. Or you can gain and then you gain a wheat from the bird feeder if available. So you activate, whatever row you play in, you activate. So sometimes you can get some cool combos that happen, but generally it's not as common because you just don't have as many. It seems like you would need to have more cards coming out in the game for that to happen, really. And I would say that I imagine, that this is a problem with a 2-player game versus a higher number of players. It doesn't seem like our bird display wants to move as much as I want it to. I want there to be more birds out there. And when you're drawing your bird cards, you can always draw blind. You can just draw off the stacks of cards. You don't have to take ones that are face up. But boy, I don't like to do that. But anyway, so I'm sure it's just up to the players and how they play. And since we're, a mother and a daughter, I'm sure our playing styles tend to be somewhat similar. So it may just be the way we play. It doesn't seem like the cards move as fast. Now, in terms of like things that maybe I don't like about the game, these are just like really minor things in my opinion. Things I don't like. Well, again, the cards moving at a good clip is one issue that I have. The other issue that some people have is that while there is this amazing variety of cards, I think there's like 170 cards altogether. Essentially, the activations fall into just a smaller number. There's less variety. Let me say that. It feels like, there might be 12 birds that have almost the exact same activation text. And some people complain about that. I can kind of understand that, but in reality, I don't even know that you could have 170 different cards, have 170 different activation properties, and then not have those fight against each other too much in terms of they have to be relatively balanced and they have to work well with other cards. So maybe that's something that people don't like, but I don't know. It also just makes it less chaotic. I feel like if you had 170 birds and 170 different things that happened, it might be too crazy. So I have heard that complaint. It's not particularly a complaint I have, though. The only other, I don't know, complaint I might have is we have found, and again, this may be an issue with just not getting enough bird cards out there or not investing enough in the draw bird cards action. We largely have had trouble achieving these objectives. So the private objectives that you get at the beginning of the game, I've had trouble getting them. For example, the cartographer is birds with geography terms in their names. 21% of cards have that, and then you need to get 2 to 3 of those for 3 points, or more than 4 for 7 points. So, maybe it's just the nature of our playing style, but I don't think either of us have had many opportunities to actually get points from the individual goal cards. So that's another, maybe that's a complaint, but again, maybe it just has something to do with our personal playing style. But anyway, I really enjoy it. It's lovely. It's fun. They are coming out with an expansion at the end of November. That will be European birds, which I'm very excited about. I think the price is in like the $25-ish range, and I don't know anything else about it. I don't know how many cards it will be. I just know that it's going to be European birds. So I'm excited about that, to learn more about those birds, and also excited that they are introducing extra expansions, so we could learn lots about South American birds or what have you. I'm excited about that. So that is Wingspan. So yeah, there are the games that we've played the most this year so far. I hope you found it helpful, or if you didn't, I hope you stopped watching before now. I will see you soon with a regular episode. Thanks a lot. Bye.